retired Army officer, airborne and Ranger qualified, 24 years in the FBI, both the hostage rescue team and the crisis negotiation unit. One of only 5 FBI agents to ever do that. How early do you wake up?
Good question. From our inception of our country, so many sacrificed everything. So I truly felt an obligation.
What makes a good hostage negotiator?
Letting go of the ego. I truly believe it all starts with that.
Welcome to the World and Stuff podcast. I am Drew Petrimoulx. Today, I'm so excited to talk to Kyle Vowinkel. He is a super interesting guy, former FBI. We're going to talk about some really interesting case studies and some of the lessons that have been learned through them at the FBI. So thank you so much for being willing to come in and chat with us.
I appreciate the opportunity to be here, and I'm glad our mutual friend connected us.
Awesome. So let's go through this. West Point grad, retired Army officer, airborne and Ranger qualified, 24 years in the FBI, both the hostage rescue team and the crisis negotiation unit. One of only 5 FBI agents to ever do that in the history of the Bureau. Deployments to Iraq and Afghanistan, senior lecturer at Cornell. Now the founder of a company called Elite Mindsets, where you're taking all the lessons that you've learned and applying that to Fortune 500 companies and prestigious institutions. How early do you wake up?
Good question. I used to wake up quite early, right? At West Point and in the Army, you had morning formations at 6 a.m. So these days, I get to sleep in probably till 6:30, 6:45. So it's not that early of a day for me, but I'm still vigorously pursuing this kind of journey of life, right? That we're on this, I call it leadership journey, constantly learning, constantly growing, and trying to help and elevate others. And it's been an incredible privilege to serve my country for over 32 years, starting from, high school when I grew up in Miramar, which is San Diego, California. Like patriotism, coursed through my veins in a positive way, with the Top Gun jets roaring overhead. My dad was a naval aviator in Vietnam, and that just love of country and desire to serve was instilled in me from my father and from that community at a very young age.
Yeah, it strikes me as so much of what I just ran through involves being willing to put your life on the line to protect a stranger. And that's something that I think is so beautiful and compelling, and also difficult for another person to want to do for somebody else. And I just, you kind of hinted a little bit about, but where does that desire to do that come from?
It stems from, I believe, our country. I'm a student of history, as I know you are, and you look back at, from our inception of our country, so many sacrificed everything through so many challenges and literally risked their lives so that we could live in this greatest country on earth. And certainly we're not a perfect country, but all those sacrifices through the multiple conflicts, the multiple challenges, and the people that gave everything, they risked their lives for future generations. So I truly felt an obligation myself to contribute towards that national defense, to be part of the team that protects this community and our nation. And I just felt that strongly about it. So it's a natural kind of continuation of that protection mindset, because it's from the nation, you break it down to that individual. And especially if it's an innocent individual who has done nothing wrong, who's been kidnapped by a deranged, diabolical man, or a terrorist who has killed a child and a woman and has no regard for human life. I will gladly, and the rest of my teammates would, and the other FBI agents and men and women in the military I served with, they would gladly put their lives in the line of fire to protect others, because that's the way the ethos of team before self and protecting others is just ingrained in me from those units that I was fortunate enough to serve with.
You were at West Point 1989 to 93, and I wonder, world events that happened. When I was in college, it was the second Iraq War, and the politics around that, the discussions around that, the history around that was very formative to me and led me into journalism and being interested in history. And I wonder if the events surrounding your time at West Point, I guess you have the fall of the Soviet Union, the first Gulf War, were these influential in your trajectory of where you wanted to go with your life, how you ended up in the Army?
Great question. I was interested in the Army. My brother actually was a West Point cadet when I was a junior in high school, and we went to visit my brother. And I have one older brother. That's it. And I was unsure what I wanted to do. And then I saw the campus, I saw the uniforms, I saw the discipline and the camaraderie at West Point, and it's a very special place. And I told my parents after that visit, I want to go to West Point. And they kind of laughed and chuckled at me because I was not the best student. I was a pretty good student, but not the best student. I was also the class clown. So I was constantly making jokes, having fun with other people. And I'll never forget my physics teacher in the parent-teacher conference in 11th grade. My mother said, "Oh, Kyle's interested in West Point." And the teacher said, "There's no way Kyle would survive at West Point." And I took that as a personal challenge. All right, I like to think I don't take myself very seriously, but I take the job or mission very seriously. So I took West Point very seriously, and those events definitely shaped, right? We no longer had this massive, Russian armada to worry about with the collapse of the Soviet Union. And the Gulf War, you remember how quick that victory was. So
it was like the U.S. is invincible. It's the end of history. There's no rival. Yeah, I just wonder how that shaped your perspective coming out and then going into your career.
Well, because what happened, I met a fellow cadet at West Point whose father was an FBI agent. And he told us about the FBI, and he took us to an FBI range. And he took us to the FBI driver's training called Tactical Emergency Vehicle Operations Course, TVOC, which used to be in Wallkill, New York. So I went to those two things over the course of 6 months. And with the fall of these, enemies and the interest in the Bureau and hearing him talk about how much more kind of autonomy and independence you have as an FBI agent compared to a regular soldier. And the Army, right, necessarily so, is very regimented. And I don't like super regimentation, right? The Army tells you how to brush your teeth. Like literally at West Point, your toothbrush head has to be pointed one way towards the door. The toothpaste has to be pointed the other direction away from the door. So that's how strict your toothbrush and toothpaste have to be arranged in your medicine cabinet at West Point. And I detested that. I loathed that. But there's a reason, right? They have that uniformity, and every medicine cabinet, all the 4,000 cadets, you open it up and it'll have that toothpaste and toothbrush aligned. So there's a method behind that. I knew, though, long term, I would not do that well under that kind of strict control. And so the FBI interested me. And so actually from graduation, I chose military police as my branch because I thought the law enforcement experience would give me a good entryway into my future Bureau application. But I wanted to challenge myself, so I went to airborne school, I went to Ranger School, the Army's toughest leadership school, and earned both those badges, thankfully, and set me up well in the Army.
Is it fair to say that, did you almost not have an adversary that was strong enough to make you desire to stay in the military? Because at that point where we were at in history, and you're like, I gotta go in the FBI where I can, be out on the streets fighting the bad guys in kind of more dynamic situations. I don't know if that's fair.
No, it's a great question. I don't know if it was really adversary, but I knew that the Army's main job was to train, right? And with those fall of those two significant adversaries, the likelihood of a significant conflict in the future was low. So that played a little bit of a role, but the majority of the decision, I think, was because I wanted to be a more active participant and not just training for an event which you hope and pray never happens, right? In the military, no one prays for peace more than the soldier, whereas in law enforcement, I would actually get to do those things like put handcuffs on people, conduct investigations, see the results of not just training, but performing your job. So I think that was the bigger draw and reason to go in the FBI.
Yeah, let's talk about that transition to the FBI and specifically going into the hostage rescue team. What about that was alluring? And I want to talk to you a little bit about the training, because I've heard it's just it's next level and kind of Navy SEAL-esque, if that's a fair way to put it.
Absolutely. I first was in Los Angeles, my first duty assignment, and I tried out and made the FBI Los Angeles SWAT team, which is a very select elite SWAT team. The Bureau at that point had 9 enhanced SWAT teams, which mean they received additional training, a higher level of weapons and gear, and they would deploy to those higher risk missions. And I really love the camaraderie and the teamwork and that tactical mission set to do those, again, the highest risk missions against the fugitives who were armed and dangerous, the kidnappers. And I did that for 3 years in LA. And the top tier tactical asset in the United States government for law enforcement is the FBI hostage rescue team. And everyone in the FBI knows this. And I viewed that as the ultimate challenge. That would be the ultimate job, to work on that preeminent tactical team, the Department of Justice counterterrorism team, the elite FBI hostage rescue team. There's only been 300 or so operators who'd ever been on the team at that point. So I knew it was an uphill battle and challenge. I thankfully had two great partners, fellow LA SWAT teammates, Mike and John. We tried out and trained together. Just the preparation for the HRT tryout was a 12-month process. So guys, give you an idea of the scope. We were like semi-professional athletes, like diligently planning out our training schedule. The training included firearms, pool work, rucking, doing obstacle courses. You're put through many, many different scenarios, and it's a grueling, gut-wrenching 2 weeks. You're sleep deprived, and you're constantly assessed. There's peer evaluations, and it's soul-crushing, just the tryout. So it's a 2-week tryout compared to other special forces selection processes. Actually, HRT was formed back in 1983 with input from the Delta Force, because they have such similar mission sets, and the relationship between those two units is quite close to this day. So we have many events that were patterned after the Delta Force selection. Interesting tidbit.
This is like the type of stuff you see in movies. Are you able to watch like movies about hostage situations and enjoy them now, or are you like picking them apart being like, actually, you wouldn't do that?
It's very tough. And I enjoy Hollywood movies. I really enjoy being kind of escape, but it's tough for me not to critique, because to me, you can make the movie very accurate and still make it entertaining and still have some leaps of logic.
There's just those little things that you see in there.
Yeah, like the special agent in charge, the SAC, like he would never go first in the door, to kick down a door. He's going to be in the command post. Little things like that. Yeah, they do bother me. But like Silence of the Lambs, I loved. That was a fantastic FBI movie with Clarice Starling. And actually, there is a small reference to HRT in there. Scott Glenn, he's in the military aircraft bird, and I think they find Buffalo Bill's house, or they think it's Buffalo Bill's house, and it's just like a 3-second clip, and no one knows this unless you watch the movie or FBI fan. But he says, "I want to send HRT to the house." So there's a reference to HRT on Silence of the Lambs. It's kind of interesting.
So with the hostage rescue team, that's where you're deployed to Iraq and Afghanistan, and I guess you were attached with DoD. Like, tell me about that, because I just imagine during that time, the work that you're having to do is pretty dangerous. Is that fair to say? What is the hostage rescue team doing in Iraq and Afghanistan?
Excellent question. So I did, on my second time, I'll tell you, the first time I tried out at that selection process for HRT, I was not selected. And that was devastating. A personal goal that I'd set and worked for well over a year, doing 2-day workouts with my two buddies, and they were selected and I was not, and that made it even harder. So personally, that was really a defining moment in my life, because I'd had that goal to try and make the premier team, and I'd failed. I was not selected. So after some soul searching, and a mentor of mine, he said, "Hey Kyle, you only go around the carousel of life once, and you have to reach for that brass rung, and you missed it the first time. You probably have one more chance. You want to go for it. And do you want to look yourself in the mirror and have not tried a second time?" And as simple as those words were, it was right. I didn't want to look myself in the mirror and have not give it one more shot, because it is such a investment of time, such a distraction of family, so much energy, and again, it's soul crushing, the 2-week process. So I did it, and thankfully selected the second time.
What was the difference that made? Were you just in better physical shape, or?
Actually, I may have been a tiny bit less as good physical shape, because I didn't have the partners pushing me as well. There's a couple mistakes I made. Everyone makes a bunch of mistakes. There's, lots of events, and you're constantly evaluated. And back then, if there's any question in their mind, if compatibility, attitude, trainability, judgment, if there's any question in their mind, they would say, "Hey, thanks for coming out, Kyle. You can come back next year if you'd like." So that was an invitation to come back. But if you didn't even get that, then they didn't even want to see you again.
So they're kind of saying you're close, but maybe you need a little bit of work.
Exactly.
They're not telling you exactly what you need to work on.
Exactly. They're very, it's zero feedback while you're going through it. So imagine that, like giving your all for like a 4-hour event, tracking someone through the woods with 35 pounds on your back with a weapon. And this is like day 4 with very little sleep. You're physically exhausted and you complete your mission and you get zero feedback. You don't know if you did it well. You don't know if you failed. You don't know if you missed your time hack. You don't even know if you got the right guy. And then you're getting briefed on the next training evolution. So psychologically, that's very challenging, right? We all seek and desire feedback. How do we do? So that is a part of the process which was challenging. So jumping forward then, after I was on a couple of years, I was a sniper initially, and this is in 2006, with the military is exceptionally good at prosecuting targets overseas. Like they could, a kill capture mission for this bomb maker site, and they would execute the target, and then not much would happen on the target. Where the Bureau, we brought an investigative mindset to the target. We conducted what we termed sensitive site exploitation, or SSE, and we trained the military back in the States on this SSE. So we said, when you go to the target, let's say your subject is not there, you're looking for, you should interview all the family members, also interview the neighbors to the left and right, see if he's been there. Maybe this is his house, maybe he's coming back in 2 hours. Like, talk to the kids, like get a sense of what is going on there. Look at the digital media, right? Conduct a mini investigation on target. And we're trained investigators, and we were exceptionally good at that. And they saw that, and through some high level, at the 4-star general level with FBI director, there was an agreement made. Let's try to embed FBI agents with those special mission units, with the Tier 1 U.S. Army and U.S. Navy units. So my partner and I were the first 2 in the rotation to Mosul, Iraq, embedded. We were both attached to a platoon, and we were going on target with them to help conduct that sensitive site exploitation. And it's a combat zone, right? We're going outside the protected, forward operating base, the FOB, and as soon as you exited that FOB, especially in Mosul, Tal Afar at that time, you were subject to IEDs, being fired upon. You're in, the worst of the worst territory. So it was incredible to think, I'm an FBI agent in the middle of a combat zone. What am I doing here? That thought went through our minds several times. And we not just were there, we had advocated to be there. There was a lot of resistance, right? We had to overcome significant resistance, even though the higher level officers had blessed it. At the mid-level manager and our level, there was a lot of skepticism. Why does the FBI need to be here? Are you investigating us? Like, if we have a shooting on target, are you going to be watching and going to later testify against us? Or are you going to try to make us look bad? So,
and also Iraq and Afghanistan become controversial politically, and there's the calls for the timeline and all that kind of stuff. And I just wonder, did that impact you guys at all? Are you watching the way it's being talked about back at home, and what's the conversation that's being had? And how did you? I guess maybe the question is, like, how did you feel about the mission?
So while we were there, we did 90 to 120 day rotations. Just depends on the unit. We would fly in with the unit and fly out with it. So I really like that. So we were truly part of that unit. And you're so focused on the mission, and it's really a fabulous thing in some regards because you're laser focused. Mm-hmm. Like, my whole world, tunnel vision down to this next objective. The guy's an IED maker, and I would study all the intel on his connections. Who does he know? Who is in that area? So I was almost the S2 as the intel officer for the military. I would try to be almost like an S2 on target. So again, I was so focused on accomplishing, trying to dismantle the network when we got on target to have as much impact as possible. That was so many echelons above our level that I really tuned it out. I didn't watch the news. I didn't really pay attention to any of that because I was just focused on surviving first and foremost, like getting out of there alive with everyone else and trying to make it have a positive impact for the Bureau for any connections. Because the other thing too, we're looking for any connections to U.S. cases, or if there's like a U.S. phone number on target. We had satellite communication gear, So I literally could have that phone number, send it back to Washington, D.C., and within minutes, let's say the phone number went to, a house here in Washington, D.C., there would be agents knocking on that house door within minutes. So that reach back capability that we brought on a target was incredible.
So then you come, I guess you come back from Iraq and Afghanistan, and that's when you start your work with the Crisis Negotiation Unit. Can you just talk about the transition? And I'm really interested in the differences. And, it strikes me a little bit as kind of maybe like the Hawks and the Doves type of situation. I know that's probably not fair, but like, how did you end up going from like being in such like a forward deployed in the most dangerous situations to trying to think about like can you work in a more psychological way? Is that a fair way to frame it?
It's a mental total framework shift of the mindset. And really for me, one of the key moments was we had plans for Christmas. My wife's Hawaiian. We were getting ready to fly to Hawaii. I think it's December 23rd. And we had 3 missions cycles. There's like a mission cycle where you had to be ready to go within a half hour. There's a training cycle. Then there's the support cycle. So depending on which cycle you're on, your recall status would increase or decrease. And we were in support. That was the time we're supposed to take vacation, supposed to take leave. But the team is small, right? There's 75-ish true operators, and we're getting ready to go to the airport, driving to the airport, and the phone goes off with a mission. And I said, honey, the team's got a mission. I need to be with the team. That this is what I trained for, this is what I live for, and there's not enough guys. We need every single guy. And I got out of the car, and she's shaking her head, and she said, you're leaving me. The family's going to Hawaii, and you're leaving to go on a mission. Mm-hmm. And I said, yes. And I felt horrible about the way I sent clearly the message to my family through my actions that I was choosing the work over them. And that was the final, needle in a haystack, and I realized I had it all backwards. I need to put the family first. I'd done 8.5 years on the team as an operator. I loved it. We were truly making a difference. And she was concerned about my safety. Interesting. I was never too concerned, right? Because I knew I was with the baddest men on the planet. And we had resources and people that would give their life to protect mine to protect others. So I'd been in several firefights, and I'm not that I'm not scared, because you're scared every time, but if it's your time, it's your time. So I didn't stress about my safety, if that makes sense. She did, though. It aided her every minute of every day. And so she was a big push to leave because of that safety issue and because of the constant deployments. So, because we were gone almost 50% of the time. So then I said, hey, I'll talk to the negotiation unit chief. And there was an opening because they wanted a former hostage rescue team operator to be in the unit. This is the unit chief, recognized that there was a gap. They'd had 3 or 4 in the past before me, but they currently didn't then, and they wanted someone to be able to bridge that gap between those 2 divides, because they do think entirely differently. Hostage rescue team is the tenets of a assault for hostage rescue are speed, surprise, violence of action. Right? A negotiator, exact opposite, wants to slow things down. A negotiator talks about emotions. A negotiator avoids violence, avoids even language that alludes to violence. Yeah. So making that mental shift, making that mental shift is definitely an adjustment. And the CNU folks, I was fortunate enough to train and learn from the best of the best, like mental chess grandmasters. Gary Nesner, been a mentor of mine, the founding unit chief of CNU, Vince Delfonso, Mark Thundercloud, like true legends, guys that did 30 years negotiating, true subject matter experts. So I was truly lucky to learn from them, the best of the best.
Yeah, let's talk about the differences between those 2 units in reference to where some of these issues arose, and that's what happened in Waco in 1993. Just like a little bit of a refresher, this guy David Koresh, he had this basically a cult, the Branch Davidians. They were holed up in this compound in Waco. ATF goes in with kind of a pretty aggressive takedown of the compound. They were suspected to have illegal weapons there. Shootout ensues. 4 ATF officers are killed. 6, I think, Branch Davidians were killed in the shootout. A standoff ensues. The FBI is called in. It's like 51 days. The FBI goes in with tear gas. The Branch Davidians light the place on fire and kill like 70 people. That a pretty good.
Yeah, it's one of the most horrible days in federal law enforcement history.
The day when the fires were lit and all these people died, including 20 children, obviously a horrific incident. And one of the big things that arose from that is the lack of communication between the rescue team and the negotiator. What, in your assessment, was the breakdown that, I don't think you can blame the FBI in any way for what happened, because it was the Branch Davidians that apparently lit these fires, but like, what could have been handled better, and what were the lessons learned from that, and then how does that apply to your career?
So it was the organizational structure, the crisis response structure. The Bureau, FBI, did not have a national level kind of structure in place. There was like 2, I think, full-time negotiators, and they weren't even at Quantico, and then some part-time negotiators. Then you had the National Tactical Asset Hostage Rescue Team, and they did not work together. So at Waco, there was a just headbutting of a difference of opinion of how to proceed. And the negotiators initially did a great job. They got 25, and probably even more than that, people out alive. They successfully persuaded Koresh to let some women and children go. So think each and every one of those lives is a life saved to negotiation. And it brings up this term that Gary Nestor came up with, is the paradox of power, where the more force you bring to a situation, the more likely you are to meet resistance. And Waco is a perfect example of that. I'm all for prosecuting federal laws. However, the method of that super aggressive, like frontal assault with guns out and fully decked out.
First by the ATF.
By the ATF, yeah. Just, we talk about defending our castle, and put yourself in the perspective of Koresh, even though Koresh is at fault here. He sees this almost Armageddon doomsday coming. It fulfills kind of his prophecies in his mind, his believers, that we're going to be attacked someday. So they fight back and shoot. Again, I'm not justifying at all what they did, but had it been from the beginning handled differently, right, with not that massive show of force, that I think it could have been a better resolution. So after Waco, there's a Wyman report done, congressional investigation inquiry, and they said the FBI needs to create a critical incident response group, CIRG, as an umbrella to house all the crisis response entities from the FBI, the national level assets, and they'd be stationed there at Quantico. Hostage rescue team being one of them, of course, the crisis negotiation unit being another one, like the bomb technicians, right, the behavioral analysis unit. So they all were put under that umbrella of this new unit with an assistant director, and then they're all in one chain of command.
They train together.
They train together, they live together, they work together, and they get along much better together. But there's still that, different mental perspective. And one thing too, you think about is natural tendency. If you're a journalist, what do you want to do? You want to do journalist stuff. If you're an HRT operator, what do you want to do? You want to do HRT stuff, right? You want to break through the door. You want to save the child. And what do negotiators do? Negotiators want to negotiate. So you have this natural tension of everyone wants to do their own job. Tension is normal as in anything, but it helps to have someone like me that I speak both languages, right? Especially after I got a couple of years under my belt at CNU. I gained a little bit of respect there. Nothing like the guys at 30 years, but nonetheless, I had some successes, and I was able to kind of straddle those two worlds and try to get them in sync in a couple big high-level operations, which are thankfully successful.
What makes a good hostage negotiator?
Letting go of the ego. I truly believe it all starts with that. Putting the other person in the spotlight, and you frame everything from their perspective. You no longer are the star of the show as a negotiator. You are making them the star. You're trying to understand them and listen and put yourself in their shoes. And if you do that right, you just let go of your ego, you focus on that other person, genuinely try to connect with them, understand their perspective, you can do incredible, amazing things.
Let's get into a couple of these cases where you've been able to put some of these skills to test. The boy in the bunker case, nightmare. That this is like the stuff of parents' worst fears. This is January 2013. There's this guy, Jimmy Dykes. He's a deranged, I guess is a fair way to describe him, Vietnam War veteran. He boards a school bus in Midland City, Alabama. It's near Dothan, for you guys that aren't familiar with geography of the South. He demands two well-behaved children. Bus driver tries to step in to stop him. Dykes shoots the bus driver, kidnaps this little boy, Ethan Gilman, and takes him back to this bunker that he created in his yard, and calls the police, actually, and says, "This is what happened. This is where I am. Come to me." Before we get too far into it, I was so struck by the heroism of the bus driver, Charles Poland. Can you just speak to what he did in that instance, like staring down the barrel of a gun to protect these children?
It's remarkable heroism. And just to clarify one minor point, Dykes was in the Army during the Vietnam era, but he did not serve in Vietnam. Minor distinction, but it's important because he never really saw any conflict or combat, but he was in the States then.
Oh, that is important.
But Charles Poland is an unarmed, untrained bus driver who was a religious man who viewed those children as his flock. It was his job to protect those 25 or so kids on the bus that day. And he had interacted a little bit with Mr. Dykes beforehand. And Mr. Dykes, unfortunately, he was so diabolical, he was cultivating the relationship with Mr. Poland. So the route, it's a rural school route, so they go up this dirt road which passes Mr. Dykes' property. And at the end, where the bus driver turns around, Mr. Dykes had cleared some laurel brush, to make it easier for the bus driver to turn around. So Mr. Poland saw Mr. Dykes one day doing that and waved to thank him because he saw he was making it easier for him to turn around. And then he talks to his wife, Mr. Poland, and he leaves a jar of her homemade muscaline jelly and a dozen eggs and says, "Hey, my name's Chuck. Thanks for, clearing the brush." And he leaves that. And then Mr. Dykes, the next day, is exactly what he wants. He wants to build this relationship. He gives him a bag of carrots and broccoli. And so, unfortunately, on that fateful day, the 29th of January, I think, Mr. Poland then opens the door to the school bus for Mr. Dykes. Mr. Dykes steps on. That's when he sees the gun. And I've seen the video hundreds of times. It's incredible when faced with a handgun and verbal threats to kill him and demands to give him two children off the bus. Mr. Poland says, "No, you are not taking the kids off the bus." And if there's not a definition of heroism better than that, I don't know of one, because he, facing certain death, a deranged man holding a gun at 2 or 3 feet from him, and he said, "You're not taking the kids off this bus," repeatedly. And what does Mr. Dykes do? That bastard shoots him 5 times, kills Mr. Poland, who was trying to protect his children.
Dykes takes back this child to his bunker and calls the police. Where are you sitting, and how do you become aware that there's a situation in this small town in Alabama, and how do you get there?
So it was Monday, the day it happened. I was back at Quantico at the Critical Incident Response Group. I was with my partner, Vince. And I remember my boss called me and said, "Hey, there's been a kidnapping, some weird bus situation in Alabama. We have this letter. I want you to go over to the Behavioral Analysis Unit, BAU, and meet with the BAU experts, and the 4 of you kind of talk about this case." Because when Dykes walked onto the bus, he actually had a handwritten letter that, because we think he was maybe unsure if he could get out the words or not to Mr. Poland. And in the letter, he says, "I want you to hand over 2 well-mannered children, healthy, and nothing will happen to them or you. Just follow directions, do it now." And so we analyzed this letter with those four two BAU folks and myself and Vince. And actually, the first time I remember, like, Vince and I distinctly disagreed with him because there was no reference to any physical abuse or victim selection. He just said he actually deferred responsibility to Dykes to pick the two victims. So he didn't ask for a boy or a girl, and he didn't say a height or size. So we didn't view the children as being objects of his sexual desire or some fantasy, right? Even though the children are obviously in high-risk situation, they're kidnapped, we didn't think he was using them for his own pleasure, which is horrible. It's still not, it could be worse, right? If he was,
sure, if
that was his means. And the BAU initially were debating, they said, well, we think he may. And we said, well, where's the behavior? Where's the language in that letter that says that? So Vince was fantastic. He taught me, use facts, speak your mind, and don't be afraid to disagree with others. So that played in kind of throughout my career there in CNU. So that's day one. And then we are told, hey, you guys prep your bags to be ready. And then that night we get the deployment order to fly out. And the FBI has a, charter aircraft that SIRG flies in. So we drove out to the airfield, hopped on the bird, and then we flew out there and got there early morning, day 2.
What does Dykes want?
Dykes wants a hearing. He wants to tell his story. In his perspective, he's an injustice collector, meaning he's had all these slights throughout his life, and they're not really slights against him, right? He gets a ticket in Indiana for his 18-wheel truck being overweight, but in Michigan, he makes the weight. So even though the states have different laws for different weights, he felt persecuted because he got the ticket in one state and would not have got it in another state. It's not even logical, of course, right? It doesn't make any sense. But that's in his mind, him being prosecuted. And his story is going to take 2 or 3 days. He needs a female reporter to come down to his bunker. Then and only then, when the female reporter is in the bunker, would he release Ethan, his victim. So it was a true kind of exchange. Ethan, he had no means or no desire to hurt Ethan, but it was his bartering chip, his power to make the powers that be us listen, and then in exchange for that female reporter to tell his story.
You start communicating him with him through this PVC pipe,
yes,
and quickly figure out that there are improvised explosive devices in the pipe. Tell me about that situation, how you figured it out, and what you did about it.
Well, that was night 1. We were not there yet, but the fantastic job by the on-scene folks there night 1. One of the, I forget his name right now, but he's a agent there. It's a white PVC tube sticking up out of the ground, and Bill Rafferty was the first local FBI negotiator, FBI trained negotiator, talking to Dykes. And this is after they'd done conversing for the night, so maybe 9:30, 10 o'clock. And he says, hey, we'll try to see what we can see down this speaking tube. He puts a little fiber optic camera down the speaking tube, and there's obstruction. You can't really make it out. So they call a bomb technician, FBI bomb technician, who comes up with an x-ray machine. They x-ray it, and then holy cow, there's an improvised explosive device right in the speaking tube that 5, 10 law enforcement officers have been standing around for hours all day. So now is this, diabolical man not only killed a heroic bus driver, he's kidnapped an innocent 5-year-old, and now he's an offensive bomb directed at negotiators and law enforcement.
There was a point after that where you persuaded him to take a cell phone, and
it wasn't a cell phone. So there was a combination of negotiators from all different teams that came together. But the Atlanta team was the first ones to. There was a storm coming. This is on that early morning of day 2. The storm is coming. They're talking to Dykes, and they again framed it from his perspective. A good negotiator says, "We want to make it easier for you to be able to call us. We don't want it." They didn't tell them about they'd found the bomb yet. They had set up a speaker actually, so they're not talking or not standing there, but they're talking to a speaker through the tube and said, "Hey, we want you to be able to call us anytime, and we don't want you to be standing out here when the rain's coming. So we know you care about us. Can we give you a landline, a phone you can pick up anytime and call us? It'd be so much easier for you. And then we won't lose communications." And so they persuaded him after hours and hours to accept that throw phone.
Is that how you guys got a camera in there and a recording device that you could spy on him?
To this day, I don't reveal the specific techniques, although you can see for yourself. The videos are online, and put 2 and 2 together.
But you did that. I mean, and that was a key part, right? Is being able to have eyes and ears inside the bunker gave you an advantage that I imagine was pretty crucial.
Well, think of the pressure on leadership, on tactical, on negotiators when we have no eyes or ears inside of this bunker, right? Is he physically abusing him? Is he sexually abusing him? Is he feeding him? Is he, what is he doing to him in there? And then to get suddenly 24/7 visibility to hear and listen and see what's going on in there, now we can instantly assess the level of risk to Ethan, how he's being cared from this covert collection method. So it was a game changing, because now like tactical has to be ready in like literally seconds to go. We always have an emergency assault team ready to go, and they were always ready, but it helps to know now that with that feed, like, okay, Ethan's asleep, he's asleep, it's very unlikely that they're gonna have to go in. It gave some breathing room to command and tactical and negotiators.
Ethan was suffered from some disabilities, I take it, and he needed to get medication, and that started to provide an opportunity. Can you talk about what that opportunity was and how you saw that?
He had a form of autism that required medication 3 times a day, and in Dykes' letter, he asked for healthy, well-mannered kids, and he wanted 2. We think he wanted kind of a spare, a backup, just in case this exact situation happened, right? If one had health issues, he would have a second child. Well, he only got 1, and he got one with a medical issue, which again was another kind of game changer for law enforcement, because now he wanted law enforcement not to come up to his bunker lid. He spent over a year preparing this fortification, these defensive positions, the IED, the really concentric circles of defense to keep law enforcement out. And now the fact that Ethan needed a medicine pill 3 times a day, we were able to go up to that bunker lid with 1 envelope, with 1 pill, and go right up to the top of that bunker lid and conduct, target reconnaissance of that exact place that we're going to go in, or hopefully, potentially breach it. Now we get to see that thing 3 times a day, every day. So game changing, where before we had to be, 50 yards away. We never could have approached that stealthily.
And so essentially you guys decided when he opens up the lid to take one of these pills, let's shoot his ass.
It's a little more than that. It was on day 5. Mm-hmm. So think for 5 days, and I'll just say my role when I got there day 2, the tactical was going up to deliver the meds to him, right? And I saw it was like 4 tactical guys from the local sheriff's department and 4 HRT guys. And they're talking to Dykes at the bunker. So anytime you have communications with a subject, you should have a negotiator there. And so I went with the boss and I said, hey boss, I'm the perfect guy to accompany them as the negotiator to and from the bunker each day, because I'm tactically trained with the best of the best, and obviously I know the HRT guys exceptionally well, and then I can be right there to help at the target site. Even though
those conversations like,
they were not too long and drawn out. Tony was the first sheriff's deputy to kind of converse with him, and we would first, Bill Rafferty again was the primary negotiator, so he was on that phone. So most of the negotiations, 99% of it is via the phone call, but he would socialize beforehand. Hey, it's 9:30, ready for Ethan's morning medication. Sure, okay, we're going to send the guys up. Okay, so Dykes would know beforehand that we're coming up there, because we wanted no surprises. And what I tried to do is instill some consistency in those communications and try to make it into a rapport building opportunity. The more rapport and connectivity we could have with Dykes and law enforcement, I was hopeful in the future we may be able to capitalize on that to our advantage. So the boss said, yeah, Kyle, you're the perfect guy. Gear up with him. You go to and from the bunker. So they were not long conversations, but maybe a minute or 2. But nonetheless, each time we're engaging with a subject, we're building rapport, establishing some trust, and again, getting consistency, because I wanted each and every delivery to be very similar. We never wanted to get his emotions rise up, or we didn't want him rattled at all. We wanted him to be calm, cool, and collected so that he wouldn't vent and have any rage against Ethan.
And then can you just tell me, I know there was a plan that didn't work out.
Day 5, I heard on the conversation with Bill Rafferty, Dykes says, hey, this hatch lid is so heavy, it's like 175 pounds, and there was 2 garage door springs, which came down from a telephone pole to help him lift it So think 2 heavy-duty garage door springs. One had popped off in a storm on night 4. So day 5, he offers to help law enforcement lift up the hatch from below so that we can reattach the second spring. Think about it for a moment. We have 200 law enforcement officers. We literally had the Secretary of Defense, SecDef of the Department of Defense, their offices calling. We could have any resource we wanted. I think we could ask NASA for a flyby. Like, it was so awesome to be that high level of a priority mission to have all these resources. So we didn't need the subject obviously help us with anything. But the fact that our negotiating, our communications and connecting with him, our treating him with respect, even though he's a diabolical killer, couldn't stand him, but we don't judge when we're negotiating, right? We let go of our ego, we try to bond and build rapport. And that's exactly what happened. He, because of that rapport building efforts, he said, hey, I want to reciprocate and help you guys out. I'll come up from below. I will lift up the hatch lid so that you guys can reattach that second spring. So again, my mind is blown when I hear that. I run to the boss. I say to boss, Dykes is offering to help, and he's going to have both hands potentially under that lid. And if Ethan is not there, I said, boss, it's not my call at all, but this may be an opportunity to eliminate the threat. And so we converse with the hostage rescue team leader and the special agent in charge. And this is like the lunchtime delivery. And the boss said, hey, it's standard FBI deadly force policy. If that first shooter, perceives the threat or has an opening, right? Because we didn't change the policy. I got to be crystal clear on this. But he viewed it as Ethan being in imminent danger. And if we viewed Ethan as imminent danger, then we can use deadly force. That makes sense. So
seems reasonable.
We go up for that noon delivery, just like normal. First thing, knock. Hey, Jim, it's us. This is after the call. Been socialized by Rafferty. We got the meds for Ethan. Okay, great. We slip in the envelope. I'm right here. I'm literally a foot from the opening of the hatch lid. All right, you gonna help us now lift up the hatch lid? Yep. And the HRT operator's right there, has the weapon facing towards the hatch lid opening. All right, so all he has to see, this is a no-fail shot. Right? There's an offset with your optics on a rifle, which we train, and that operator knows for sure, 2.5-inch offset here. But what he doesn't know, what we don't control, is Ethan. So if Dykes comes up, if Ethan is right there, you can't take that shot. You have to confirm, obviously, Ethan's not there, and you have to confirm that you have a good shot. And we are some of the best shooters in the law enforcement world, so there's no doubt he can make the shot, but again, it's just a zero-fail shot. So Dykes lifts up the ladder lid. I see the grays of his hair. I put my hands over my earmuffs. I'm thinking this is going to be over very shortly because I'm literally inches away, but I have no fear because I know this guy can shoot, and that's the beauty of the training regimen, HRT, is that trust built up. And as Dykes is coming up, the finger is coming back on the trigger as the operator is confirming the shot. And 1 in a million, like the sun glints off the edge of the barrel. Dykes sees that sun glint, immediately drops down below the hatch lid and screams, "You motherfuckers. I was trying to help you, and you just tried to kill me." All that 5 days of rapport building, 5 days of setting up for that exact moment. I'm not disparaging the operator. The operator can't take that shot, but we lost the opportunity, and that is the beginning of the end because Dykes now spirals out of control. And one of my mistakes is we conversed too long there. I was trying to calm him down, and he was just getting further and further spun up. And it was going nowhere. So I finally have to pull Tony and back us off probably a minute too long. We stayed there because now we are the object of his rage being so close. And we finally get back, but Bill calls. They had a good line. They said, hey, he wasn't trying to kill you. Guy was just too close to the edge. He's been fired. He's never going to come back there. But Dykes doesn't really believe it. He knows we tried to kill him.
So you're in day 5 then. I'm sure you're pretty worried about Ethan and unconvinced that Dykes is ever going to let him go. What action do you take? I know at some point it's like we're going in.
So our assessment, and this is what I kind of talk about now with the elite mindsets, which is interesting, is you have to get proactive in your actions, right? Kind of forecasting outcomes. And in our mind, like Vincent and I sat down, I'll never forget it, and we both said, he is not going to let Ethan go. And also at the end of the day, we are never going to give him a female reporter. So even before this incident, like day 4, we said, we assessed Dykes as steadfast in his mission, and he is not going to release Ethan before completion of his mission. So at the end of the day, law enforcement is going to have to make a choice, right? But now it was sped up instantaneously by the incident with him observing the gun barrel. And so there was no good plan, because we had structural engineers. We had the best minds in the United States government trying to help us find a way in. And we couldn't tunnel in from the side. The bunker would collapse. We were trying to breach the top with, a tow strap to a Humvee. The engineer said, hey, if you yank off the top, the whole structure could collapse on top and then suffocates Ethan. So we're
about like sleeping gas or something like that.
We talked to the doctors about sleeping gas. Like literally every option's on the table. And sleeping gas, they said the lethality high enough to put Dykes out could be potentially lethal to Ethan. So we have now like silent drills. We tried all these things. And the one thing I remembered was that when we delivered toys, a couple times we delivered toys to Ethan, and the layout of the bunker, say here's the hatch lid, there's 2 beds here. It's only 6 foot by 8 foot. And in the back corner was where Ethan would take those toys to play with. And that was like the furthest Ethan could be from the ladder well, that 11 foot straight up ladder well. And Dykes had expressed an interest in speaking with his daughters. He had 2 daughters. He had been estranged for 25 years. So I thought, hey, if we can lure Dykes up the ladder via a Skype computer call with his daughter, we get him up the ladder after we deliver toys, and if Ethan is over there, then negotiators will have made the maximum distance between victim and a hostage in a close confined space, and it'll open a potential window for tactical. But it's like a trap that didn't have to be sprung, right? So if Ethan doesn't take the toys there, he's just talking to his daughter on his Skype. Or if he doesn't come with a ladder well, he's just talking to his daughter on Skype. So it's the perfect, as I mentioned, that parallel approach plan that could go tactical, it could go negotiation. And I briefed my plan to the HRD commander. He liked it. Then I briefed to the sheriff. Sheriff liked it. We have to brief it to the FBI director. And it was kind of interesting. We have like 8 people on this conference call. And the director says, well, I like the plan, but I want to hear everyone verbally commit to it. Like he put it on each person. All right, go around the table. The sheriff, yes. SAC, Special Agent in Charge, yes. Like all around the table. And it was an interesting kind of leadership moment, because he said, well, do what you need to do, but before you do it, call me. So he kind of gave all authority to the SAC, then took it back. And that's a whole nother kind of leadership topic. We left there and talked to the SAC and said, hey, boss, that wasn't the answer from the big boss. We need to get clarity. So he did finally approve it if those 2 conditions were met, right? The trigger one being Ethan is in the corner with the toys, and the second trigger, if Dykes is up the ladder well, then tactical has that green light to conduct the assault to save Ethan. So yeah, it was my plan, kind of, right, orchestrating the 2, tactical with negotiations, to have that opportunity.
Then eventually you blow off the cover and try to get in, but there's an obstruction. That had to be at frantic moments there, because it's like right off the bat, the plan is kind of not going according to plan.
And that's what that, again, go back to or I should say, one of the things I learned from these teams is the agility. All right, first being proactive, and then you have to be agile, because no plan survives the first contact intact. You've probably heard that before. So we had looked down that hole a dozen times, right? During every one of those deliveries, we would conduct target analysis, and we never saw, and we saw one set of cables, these like bicycle lock cables, securing the hatch lid. So we had small shaped charges the breachers had made to take out those bicycle lock cables. And those blow perfectly, and they'd practice that. And then when the breachers open it up, entry looks clear, and the number 1 man jumps into the hole, right, going into a life and death situation, and he jumps in the hole, and he's like trapped. He's like hanging, his body is halfway up out of the hole, and it like doesn't compute. We're looking at it like it's like an elevator shaft. You step into an elevator shaft, you should drop straight down. He doesn't. And then he starts getting shot at from the bad guy. So our plan has not just failed, the plan has failed. I shouldn't say the plan has failed miserably. It has not functioned as designed, meaning we're hoping to disorient, distract, disrupt Dykes a little bit, and now he's actively fighting and shooting at our number one man. So they pull him out, and then they deploy some non-lethal concussion devices as flashbangs to make a lot of noise, like a million candle power light, deafening, and those are to distract and occupy Dykes while we try other methods. We tried inserting a canine. The canine could not drop down. The canine was stuck in that same obstruction. And then just some incredible leadership. A guy named Witt sensed this almost creeping despair, and I've seen Nature T overcome some incredible challenges. This is the first time I'd ever sensed like things are not going well, and like I couldn't think of an idea, and like you could just sense a little bit of the morale oozing out as far as the ability to persevere here. We weren't sure what to do, and Witt, before it could get any, and that was just, again, just a drip of it, but Witt said, guys, get in the hole. This is what we do. Get in the hole. That was just a little bit, that lightning spark that we needed, that the team needed, and the two breachers reached back in the hole. They found there was a second set of cables that Dykes had set up that morning. One guy has cable cutters, cuts them. The other one has a breaching shotgun. He shoots it, and then that same number one man, who could have easily stepped out of the line of march, he had already proven 10 times over his bravery by going down the first time, he jumps right back down the hole. And the bravest thing I've ever seen in my life, knowing there's an armed adversary waiting to kill him at the bottom of the hole, and he, without hesitation, jumps in the hole to save Ethan.
What does he do once he gets in the hole?
Well, from our rehearsals, right, we practiced dozens of times. We had a mock-up built by the Navy Seabees. He knew he was going to encounter one of two things. He was going to encounter either a 5-year-old, terrified 5-year-old, or he's going to encounter a diabolical man who's trying to kill him. And it's going to be a light switch. He's going to have to flip the light switch, fight to the death, or protect with my life. And he jumps down 11 feet, lunges forward, not knowing which he's going to encounter, and he grabs the first thing in front of him, and it's Ethan. And he grabs Ethan, he turns his body away from Dykes towards the wall, shielding his own very body to protect Ethan, and says, "You're going to be okay, Ethan. You're going to be okay." Because he knows that his number 2 man and number 3 man are right behind him, and that he doesn't have to fight because they're going to fight for him. His job is to protect Ethan, and he did that marvelously. Then the 2 and 3 man enter and eliminate the threat.
One of the things I found so compelling and interesting is when there was the discussion over who's going to be the first person to go in, that that's a job that people want. And there was even some like maybe jealousy over that person got to be the first one to go down in a hole with an armed, deranged person. Can you just talk about that mentality? Because I think most people would find that just hard to understand.
It goes to the selection process for the hostage rescue team. You have to have a certain character and a ethos of team before self, that you're willing to sacrifice everything for the person to your left or right of you. And it's ingrained in you from day one of selection to being on the team. And you are trained to such a high level. I kind of compare it to the Super Bowl. And I'm a big fan of Patrick Mahomes, Tom Brady. You know, they train, devote a lot of time and energy, but they're not heroes, right? They do it for the love of the game. They're getting paid exceptionally well. Guys at HRT and in the military put their lives on the line and train exceptionally hard, not for money, not for the love of the game, but to save lives. And that's the motto of the hostage rescue team, to save lives. And he knew, well, backing up, there's 2 teams that day. We had like an Alpha team and a Bravo team, and it was right during shift change. Like Alpha team wanted to go because they were coming off shift, but Bravo's team said, no, we're coming on shift at 2 p.m. It's our turn to be number 1. So it was both those number 1 guys, and I know both of them very well. This is the really funny point, is they're getting ready. This is during the countdown. It couldn't be more stressful, right? We're getting ready to assault the guy's bunker, and the number 1 guy from the team that didn't get to go in first, he goes over to the other number 1 guy and goes like this.
Stick.
he gives him the double bird, right? Like, fuck you. You get to go at number one and risk your life.
You get to be the person that goes first into this bunker with a deranged, armed madman.
But it really was beneficial in the fact that it kind of lowered the tension level and made him chuckle. Almost like exactly what was needed. As crazy as that sounds. But that's the type of individual that HRT selects and trains and are on that team. Is guys that want to be through that hole. Like, you want to be first. Yeah. And just like me with that Christmas mission, I wanted to be with my team to go help others to protect and to save lives. Such
a wild story. I'm going to skip over Boston bombing for now to get to some other stuff, but it's another interesting case that you worked on also in 2013. So that was just must have been just as busy as you could possibly. What the heck was going on in 2013?
Yeah, it was a banner year. Like truly 2 national level events, and have been able to play a kind of pivotal role in both is remarkable. Truly fortunate, kind of right place at right time, but also I'd earned that, if that makes sense. So I'd paid my dues, and fortunate that I think it's a proactiveness too. We won't get into Boston too much, but I was proactive 2 or 3 times in Boston, like inserting myself into situations where, had I not done that, I don't know the outcome would have been different. For example, just say real quick, when the bomber is found in the boat in Watertown, there's a big shootout. I hear it, but there's like 3,000 of us law enforcement at Watertown Mall, and we all heard it, and I thought he was probably dead right from the shootout. And then I see HRT starting to mobilize. We're all in this big parking lot, and I saw the HRT guys gearing up, and I thought, they just got the mission. So I run over there, and I talked to the team leader. I know him very well, and I say, "You guys going to get the bomber?" I said, "Yeah." And I said, "Well, can I hop in?" And he said, "Well, we're not going to need negotiators, Kyle." I said, "How about just in case?" And he kind of mulls it over, said, "Okay." But had I not had that relationship, that credibility, and that respect with tactical, and even before that, had I not been proactive and gone over there, there would be no negotiators attached to HRT when they went to get the bomber in the boat. So that's just an example of that proactiveness, like putting myself in the right position at the right time for that opportunity.
Maybe we won't go completely into it, but you were the one talking to the second brother that was in that boat at the very end of this and got him to surrender successfully. What was it like talking to somebody who was the focus of just national manhunt and the pain that had happened a few days prior at the Boston Marathon?
Similar to Dykes, as far as me loathing both individuals for what they had done. They'd killed innocent people, right? I detested what they had done. But at the time, during Alabama and then in Boston, when literally the radio crackled after every other law enforcement effort had failed to dislodge him from the boat, right? They'd fired upon him. They launched flashbangs at him. They'd command him via loudspeaker, get out, get out. None of that worked. And the FBI director sent word, tried to negotiate. And then that's when I heard on the radio, "Kyle, you're up." 3 words, which I never thought would be heard either, but thank God I was there. And I start walking up the stairs, and I literally I knew the nation was watching. I'd seen the CNN crew around the corner. There's 400 plus law enforcement on scene. The FBI headquarters is listening overhead. So I knew every word I would say would be scrutinized, second-guessed, and that this guy was a killer. But I let go of the ego, right? It didn't matter. I'd been trained. This guy has more bombs. If he shoots at me, he's going to be killed in a half second. So I wasn't worried about that. I had to connect with him. And another example of proactiveness, I'd reached out to his wrestling coach earlier in the day, Peter Payak, and I'd asked him questions about him. And he had told me, we spoke for about an hour on the phone, and he told me his nickname was Jahar. So that was one of the key moments. I wrestled in high school. I wasn't any good, but still being a wrestler in high school, I had that bond with him being a wrestler. And about halfway through, that was the magic when I said, "I know who you are, Jahar." Then he knew that I knew who he was. And that was a magic connection moment. That's how I was able to persuade and influence him to surrender. Because I showed him respect. As much as I hated him, I kept it judgment-free. I didn't use negative language. I tried to empathize with him. All right, the classic negotiator steps: introduction, demonstrate empathy. I built rapport, gained influence, and it took me over an hour, but I slowly got him to come out of the boat alive. So that was my voice.
We're talking on 9/11, and I wonder where you were on 9/11, how that affected your career trajectory, and where you ended up going.
So I was in the Los Angeles FBI office. I will not forget it. First I was at home getting ready to go to work, and I saw the first plane go into the World Trade Center. And I thought, is that an accident? Like, oh my God, what? I couldn't process it. It didn't make any sense. And I thought, well, I better get to work and haul ass. We rarely get to go code 3, right, in our FBI vehicles, which I know it sounds silly, but it's like kind of fun, right, to run code. So that morning I ran code to the office, and I heard on the radio the second tower had hit, and then I knew this is no accident. We were definitely under attack, but by who, by what? You remember there were so many questions. And that was on my first LA SWAT. One of our first assignments was I drove into the garage, we put on our SWAT tactical gear, and we were patrolling and protecting the federal building in Los Angeles on Wilshire. So I'm in full tactical gear, just roaming with my other SWAT teammates the exterior of the federal building, looking for threats, telling vehicles, hey, the federal building's closed today. Or what's going on? Check the news. And we did several later in the week. The whole FBI was focused on gaining information and intelligence about the terror attacks, and there were several leads, so we did some of those leads out in Los Angeles. But that's where I was, and what a dark day in our history that we lost all those lives.
Yeah. One of my favorite books is The Looming Tower. I don't know if you've read that.
I have not read that.
It follows John O'Neill, who was a FBI agent, and he was kind of on the case of Al-Qaeda, and one of the there was this lack of ability to recognize all the threats and communicate between the FBI and the CIA. Do you think that's been remedied? I guess the question is kind of ties into like what keeps you up at night when it comes to threats to the nation of those sorts.
So I'd worked counterintelligence in Los Angeles, and there were walls separating the counterintelligence from the criminal work. And they were designed to, again, protect civil liberties and also have like a distinction between intelligence collection and criminal actions. And so after 9/11, that was one of the things that was structurally changed, the ability to share information back and forth in very certain circumstances, not whole scale. And though I definitely saw that. So we had much better interaction with our colleagues in the CIA and NSA. So the information sharing definitively improved as a result of 9/11. And it pained me. There's a Phoenix FBI agent who literally tried to stop this and said, hey, these guys...
too.
Yeah, these guys are trying to fly planes and not asking how to land. And there was an application for, to go up on a court order, surveillance that was turned down by the Department of Justice. And that pains me to this day that a proactive couple agents had seen this coming, or something like it, right? Not exactly, but...
Pretty close.
Yeah.
What about as far as like what keeps you up at night as and threats to the homeland?
Oh, China does. The People's Republic of China is just raping the United States, not just government, but businesses, anything that they can get their hands on proprietarily or information-wise. I mean, they have whole-scale units by the thousands devoted to stealing our information. And their aggressive actions in the South China Sea truly disturb me because they are not obviously abiding by international norms. And that's what I'm mostly concerned that there's a conflict arising out of that.
Let's talk about Elite Mindset. This is the company that you founded, that you take some of the lessons that you've learned throughout your career in the Army and FBI and apply them to Fortune 500 companies and different kind of institutions. how can what you've learned apply to a more business setting? Because it's kind of a pretty niche skills that you develop, but I take it that they do translate and are helpful to people in different walks of life.
Absolutely. To me, leadership is leadership is leadership. And yes, the consequences in business are not life and death, as the crisis situations that I've worked in, but they are consequential to that business. They could mean the very survival of the business. So one of my favorite things to do is I do decision-making exercises with leaders, and I will place them in the role of decision maker in a crisis. And so it's like volatility is so exceptionally, the world is so volatile right now, and business leaders, especially after COVID, have to be so agile and run their business through that volatility. So I excelled in volatility, right? By the agility and the plans, the proactiveness, the successful resolution of those crisis situations, volatile situations. It is 100% transferable, and I truly enjoy doing it. I'm a guest lecturer at Cornell. I've gone to West Point several times. It's neat, my alma mater, have me back, talk leadership. I guess a cool moment for me. All 4,000 cadets greet me at the mess hall. They all eat together. Both of my sons were there at the time, so it was kind of cool. Not to them, but to me, to have their dad introduced to the Corps of Cadets. So it's 2 years that I've been doing elite mindsets. And yeah, the three kind of main things I focus on is proactive, kind of forecasting outcomes. And the perfect business example I like to talk about is Netflix with Reed Hastings. And back when Netflix was mailing out DVDs down the box rentals, he predicted the outcome, right? When the streaming became fast enough and installed in every home, people were not going to rent DVDs and wait for them to come in the mail. So he turned Netflix on a dime into what it is today, right? A streaming movie service. So he was proactive in his leadership of that company. So these lessons are absolutely transferable to the business world. And the next one is the agility, right? As we talked about in the bunker with adapting the plan on the fly. Same thing with business world. And I talk about kind of identifying three different outcomes as you're predicting outcomes. There's like the most likely outcome, the most desirable, then the least desirable. So I try to have business leaders if there's a significant event coming up, maybe they're trying to get two big contracts coming up. Like, let's say the most desirable is they get both contracts. Most likely is they get one contract, lose the other contract. And what's the least desirable is they lose both contracts. And now, below that, what can you influence? How can you shape the outcome to try to achieve that most desirable outcome where you get both contracts? And you identify what are those factors you can influence. And so I have a whole worksheet that I make that interactiveness, and it's quite enjoyable. Business leaders love it, and they get some inside stories from the FBI and have something they can take back to the business world.
Such valuable insight. We're running out of time, but I wanted to just get one more question. I'm so impressed with your career, and I think other people would be too. If there were some traits or advice you would give to young people who see the success that you've had and want to be able to achieve the heights that you have and be so successful, what are the traits that you think that allow people to put themselves in that type of a position?
I think the number one trait is grit, right? Success is a grind. I heard a great line the other day, like, everybody wants to be at the top of the mountain, but not everyone is willing to put in the work to get to the top of the mountain. And I've worked exceptionally hard, and I've stumbled along the way. And that's why grit is so important. Like, I actually fractured C6 and C7. I have 2 plates in my neck. I was not chosen the first time, as I told you, for the hostage rescue team, but I never gave up. Right? I demonstrated grit, and it took years and years and years of effort. And I think that's one thing maybe younger people don't understand is these things take long. The harder your goal is, the longer it's going to take you to achieve it. But then it's so much sweeter, that success, when you do reach the top.
Well, I think that's a perfect place to end it. Kyle Vowinkel, thanks so much for coming on and sharing your insight and your stories. Thank you so much for your service and all the amazing things you've done for our country and the people, innocent people whose lives have been saved and protected by you. It's just such an admirable thing, and thank you for that, and thank you for your time.
Thank you, Drew. It's been wonderful. Best of luck to you.